This podcast is produced by the Harwood Productions Podcast Network. To learn more about the network and to find more of our shows, visit us online at www.harwoodpodcast.com. Hey there guys, and welcome back to another episode of Sketchup, a 3D Toolbox. I'm Cameron Harris, and this is episode number 15. Now today we're going to talk about modeling furniture with curves. Specifically, we're going to do a couch. Now in our last episode, we modeled a table and a chair that was all straight lines. But today we're going to start getting into curves in SketchUp, which we've touched upon briefly before, but they require a little bit more thought than just drawing straight lines in SketchUp, but it's still pretty easy to do. Let me show you how. So here we are in the model that we've been working on, and you'll remember that last time what we did was we built this table and chair. Now today we're going to continue building furniture, but we're actually going to build a couch instead. Now the difference between a chair and a couch is that this couch is going to have some curved lines and curved shapes, which we haven't really worked too much with before, so it's going to be pretty interesting to learn all about that. Now I do want to point out that if you want to follow along with us and you don't have your model to this point yet, you can download this lesson file from our website. Just go to our website, which is harwoodpodcast.com, go to the SketchUp page, and look for the show notes for this episode, and you'll be able to download the lesson file from there and follow along. But now let's go ahead and start modeling our couch. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to move over so that I'm outside the room, because I don't really like to model my furniture inside the room that I'm working in. I find it's much easier to model it outside, so you're not constrained by walls, nothing's getting in your way, just much easier. So let's go ahead and start building our couch. So let's build the bottom part of it first. We'll use the rectangle tool, just hit the R key for the rectangle tool, and we'll draw let's see here. Using the dimensions box, I'll make it 7 feet by 3 feet. That looks pretty good. And now I'll go ahead and pull this up to a typical chair seat height. So maybe using the push-pull tool, the P key for push-pull, just grab this and maybe make it 1 foot 10 inches. That looks pretty good. And now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pull up this back part here. This will be the back of the couch. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm just going to grab the tape measure tool. I'm going to grab a guide coming from this line right here, click once on the edge and pull it out. And I'll use the length box, and I'll just type in 6, enter. So that's a 6-inch guide right there. And then I'll just use the line tool, L for the line tool. You know how much I love keyboard shortcuts. Click once there, click once there, done. And now this is a really nice trick. Before, to delete these guides, what we've done in the past is either use the command where you go up to the Edit menu and then choose Delete Guides, which is very nice if you have a lot of guides, but that's really kind of a lot of work if all you want to do is just delete one guide. I know, going up to a menu, it seems like that's no big deal, but if you're deleting these guides, just single little guides it's a lot of work to go up here and find the menu. So as such, what you might do then is you might think, oh, I'll just use the selection tool. But it requires quite a bit of accuracy to be able to select a guide. Requires quite a bit of accuracy just to select a line, but a guide is even worse because it's a dotted line. So what I like to use instead, you'll remember in our last episode we learned about the eraser tool, which can be found up here in the toolbar, that little pink eraser right there, or in the tool palette over here, or you can actually use the keyboard shortcut E for eraser. And what's really great about this is that whatever you swipe over, whatever line or guide you swipe over gets deleted. So just by swiping over that guide, you see it turns blue. I release my mouse, it goes away. So that's a really helpful way to delete just 1 or 2 guides when you don't really need to use the full-blown menu command up there. So now let's switch back to the push-pull tool. And I'll grab this rectangle in the back right here and pull it up. And this will be our back of our couch. Now let's go ahead and make this, just 2 feet, let's say. Very nice. And now let's make some armrests for it right here on the sides. Some nice armrests would be very nice. And this is what I'm going to use for that. I'm going to use the rectangle tool again. And I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to zoom in on this corner right here, where this little back kind of ends, the bottom right corner. Snap to that corner and click once, and then I'm going to pull it out like this. And I want this to be maybe, let's say 9 inches tall. So I'll make it 9, 6 for 6 inches wide. Go. There we go. That looks really good. And now I'm going to do the same thing over here, just on the opposite side. 9, 6. Enter. There we go. And you'll want to be careful when you're doing this that you don't enter in 9, 6, and then it ends up being 9 inches wide and 6 inches tall. It's kind of hard to predict, so just keep an eye on that. And now we'll use the push-pull tool, and we'll pull these out maybe, let's say, 2 feet. Very nice. And all these dimensions are I'm just kind of making these up off the top of my head. You can substitute your own. You can measure an actual couch that you have in your own home and model it off of that if you want. Now you'll notice that one of the things that's going on here, and we talked about this in the last episode, is by pulling these out, we've made this kind of weird shaped side of the couch. You would expect that these things would be separate, these armrests would be separate from the back and the bottom, that you would see a line here and a line here, but we didn't get that because we used the push-pull tool, which never recreates lines unless, I'm just going to undo those real quick, unless we do this again, but hold down the Option key. Well, don't hold it down, just press it before you start using the push-pull tool. You get that nice little plus symbol next to the push-pull tool. We talked about this in our last episode. Now when you click on that and pull it out, it doesn't merge with the other objects around it. It makes it its own separate object. So we'll just go ahead and do 2 feet right there. Zip over here. Hit the Option key again because it's reset. Pull it out again. And in this case, I'm actually going to just hover over this arm that we did over here, click on the face once, and now we've got perfect little armrests. So that's very, very nice. I'm very happy with that, except for one thing. The basic shapes are great, but the couch itself looks very, very boxy, very angular, not very real at all. Have you ever seen a couch that looks like this? I mean, no, that's not what a usual couch looks like. Normally a couch would have curves all over it, not just right angles everywhere. So, to make it look like it's not carved out of stone, we are instead going to actually start applying some curves. Now, you might have wondered, well, why didn't you just do curves to begin with? Why didn't you just model it with the curves rather than building it the wrong way and then adding curves? Why didn't you just do the curves from the beginning? Because in some cases, in fact, a lot of cases in SketchUp, it's way easier to take things away than it is to add things. Now, let me show you what I mean by that. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to carve, that's what I like to call it, carve, a curve out of this top corner here and this corner here and do the same thing on the rest of these things. It would be incredibly difficult to actually model it from scratch that way so that I didn't have to delete anything. It's actually way, way easier to build your couch or whatever you're working on at a right angle first and then add the curves later and then just kind of delete the rest of it. And I'll show you how we're going to do that. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make some guides for ourselves. So we're going to use the tape measure tool, and we are going to measure in, we're going to start on this corner here. We're going to measure from the left over here, pull out a guide, and let's say we want this curve to be about 6 inches. So we'll go ahead and do 6 inches there. So that's where the curve is going to start up here, and it's going to come all the way down to here, right about there. So we're going to pull down another guide to show us where that is. Again, 6 inches, because this is going to be we're basically going to be working with a square here. You could make this curve, kind of modeled off of a rectangle. You could do only 3 inches down if you wanted to, and then you'd have a kind of a curve like that rather than like this. So now we've got a point here, which is where our curve is going to start, point up here where the curve is going to end. So now we're going to actually draw that. So we're going to use the arc tool for this. And the arc tool, we covered it a while back in our basic tool series, but if you didn't watch that, go ahead and watch it again and just kind of do a refresher course on it. It is up here in the toolbar, right there. Also over here in the tool palette, looks like a little curve. You can also use the keyboard shortcut A, which is my personal favorite, to create an arc. So what we're going to do now, and you notice that our cursor has switched to that little pencil with the curve next to it right there. What we're going to do is we're going to click once at the intersection between this guide and this line right here, 6 inches down from the corner, right down here. Click once. And now at this point it looks like the line tool. You're not getting any curve at all. Don't worry about that. We're going to click at the intersection over here again. And now we can move our cursor back and forth to adjust how intense we want this curve to be. Now at this point it's really kind of up to you. It'll snap to some common angles, but really you're free to do whatever you want. You'll notice that our dimensions box has switched to the bulge box, which is kind of an odd name, but very nice nonetheless. And you can see that as I move my pencil basically back and forth, the bulge amount is changing. If the bulge was set to 0, we would have basically a straight line. But the more it bulges out, the more intense the curve is going to be. Now I'm kind of liking about 1.5 inches, so I'm going to actually just type in 1.5 and go. So now I have a very nice little curve right here. But you'll notice that that hasn't really done much. It's just kind of drawn a line on it. But what it has done is very much like we did with the rectangle here. We drew a rectangle for the armrest, and then we pulled just that rectangle out because it was its own separate face. If we switch to the selection tool, you'll notice that this main part of the couch is its own face, but this part up here is completely separate. So we can now manipulate this without affecting the rest of our couch. So what we're going to do is, we could just delete this, but that wouldn't work very well. Instead, we're going to do a similar technique when we did the windows of our room. Remember, we drew a window, when we drew a rectangle on the wall, and then we used the push-pull tool to push it back in on itself. So that's what we're going to do here, basically, except this isn't really a hole. This is more just kind of like carving out what we don't need. It's very much like sculpting. What we're going to do is we're going to switch to the push-pull tool, click on this unwanted piece right here, click once, and we're going to push it back, right? And when you push it back far enough, you'll notice that eventually you get this weird kind of purpley, whitey thing, and if you hover over it, it says on face. Now that means that we have pushed it back so that it is now snapping to the back of the couch. And if you click once, it completely goes away. So now we have a very nice curved top to our couch right there. Now, it's almost perfect. But let me go ahead and delete these guys real quick. I'll switch to the eraser tool, swipe to delete that one, and swipe to delete that one. The one thing, just tell me what's wrong with this picture. The curve starts here and it ends here. And you'll notice where it starts and ends, we have solid lines. Now that's because you'll remember that curves in SketchUp aren't really curves. If you zoom in close enough on them, you'll notice they're actually just straight lines that are just arranged in a curve, because there aren't really any true curves in SketchUp. It's all straight lines, but they're arranged to look like a curve. And the reason that you can't really see it is because SketchUp is smart enough to think, oh, well, you're doing a curve here. That means that this face right here, you don't want to see that there's a line here and a line here and a line here and a line here. We'll just smooth those out for you. Basically make them invisible, which is very nice of them. But you'll notice that right here where it transitions into a normal face, a non-curved face, we have a line. And that line doesn't look very natural. Now, you might be tempted to maybe select that line and delete it. But we need that line. You'll notice now we've completely, you'll notice that now we've completely gotten rid of that one side of our couch because, well, we need that line there to make the transition between the curved surface and the non-curved surface. Otherwise, the rule where all the lines containing a surface have to be on the same plane, well, that rule is then broken. So then the plane no longer exists. So the face is deleted. So what we want to do is we want to keep this here. We want to keep that line there, but we want to make it invisible. Much like SketchUp has done automatically for us with all of these lines in here that you can't see. So how can we do that? Well, strangely enough, we were actually onto something when we tried to delete it. We use a similar tool. We use the eraser tool. I'll go ahead and switch to that. But if we hold down the Option key, now you don't tap it, you actually hold it down in this case. Hold down the Option key and drag over a line, and instead of deleting it, release, and it smooths it. That's what the official name is. Completely smooths out that line. And you'll notice actually that when we drag over, holding down the Option key, when we drag over here, those are those lines that are invisible, that actually exist, but SketchUp has automatically softened them for us. So those are all the faces that are making up that curve. So now we're just kind of finishing what SketchUp started for us automatically. We just got two lines to smooth out, just that bottom one there, and then this top one here. Hold down the Option key, drag over, and release. And we now have a perfectly smooth curve for that part of our couch. So let's do the same thing over here. I'm going to go a little bit faster this time. First, I'm going to make a guide. 6 inches down, 6 inches in. Switch to the arc tool. Click once there. Whoops. There and there. And my bulge on the other side was set to 1.5 inches, so I'm just going to type in 1.5. Enter. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and delete these guides here. And then use the push-pull tool to push this guy back and into oblivion. There we go. But we've still got these two lines here. So we're going to switch to the eraser tool. Hold down the Option key. Swipe over that one. Swipe over that one. And we have a perfectly curved top of our couch. Very, very nice. So let's do the same thing for the armrests here. Now the armrests are kind of different. I'll show you what I mean by that. They are, if we measure here, you'll notice that our length box says that they are 9 inches tall. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make the curve 9 inches tall, but instead of going 9 inches back like this, I'm actually going to have the curve be only 6 inches in. So I'm going to make a guide at 6 inches. Now before, my curve was basically, my guide for my curve was a square, but in this case it's a rectangle. It's taller than it is wide. And I'll show you what that looks like. Using the arc tool, hover over this corner right here, hover over this corner right here, and you'll notice we're getting a kind of a different effect here. The curve is going to be a little bit more steep. So in this case, I'm actually going to do maybe about the same bulge, actually. I'm going to do 1.5. I like that bulge. And now I'm going to push this back. And you'll notice that we now have a much different curve than we did before. And in this case, you can see I'm just going to smooth this guy out. And you can see that looks, okay. But I actually like it, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this guide here. I actually like it better with the line, because the angle changing between this flat line, this straight line right here, and then going into this, not having a line there, you can't really get away with that steep of an incline change. Sometimes with these angles, if they're just too different, then smoothing them out just really looks kind of weird. So to put the line back, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the line tool and just retrace where it is. And that's going to make it visible again. So I like that much better. Let's go ahead and do the same thing over here. I'm going to zoom around to this side. 6 inches in again. Using the arc tool. Go down like this. 1.5. Push it in. Get rid of the guide. I'm not going to smooth that out. And you'll notice that that looks really, really good. There's one last thing that I want to do here, and that is this one right here. This straight line right there, kind of where your knees would be. I don't like having that be a completely right angle. I want to have that be a curve as well. But I don't want it to be like a 6-inch big curve like that. No, I want it to just be kind of like, maybe 1 or 2 inches. Just to kind of soften it a little bit. So how can I do that? Well, I'll show you exactly how. It's very similar. This is also going to be interesting because this is a much longer curve than we've ever dealt with before. So I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to use my guide, and I'm actually just going to do 1 inch for this. So I'm going to pull down 1 inch like that, and another 1 inch right here, going back to the square. And I'm going to use the arc tool. Now, if you recall, when we talked about the arc tool in our previous episodes, with the basic tool set series that we did, one of the things we mentioned was that an arc tool, you have control over how many straight lines will make up that curve. And the reason that you want to have control over that is, in some cases, if you're doing a big, big arc, the default amount of 12, you'll notice that our dimensions box has changed to say sides, and it says 12. That tells us that our curve, if we were to draw one right now, is going to be made up of 12 straight lines. But if you were drawing a really big arc, 12 lines might not cut it. You might be able to see the individual line segments. As such, you would need to crank it up to something more like, 15, 20, 24, something like that. But it works in reverse as well, because the more sides make up curves, the more faces that SketchUp has to render for you in 3D in real time. And the more faces, the faster your computer is going to need to be to keep up. And the slower and slower your model is going to become. Because this kind of stuff is pretty computer intensive. So it's really best to kind of help SketchUp out and do as few faces as you possibly can with your curves, because that's where they really get you. So what we're going to do is, in this case, because this is only a 1 inch curve, 12 sides is really overkill. In this case, we really only need maybe 3. So what I'm going to do is, before I start drawing anything, because once I start drawing my arc, it's too late. I need to switch to another tool and then back. The instant I start drawing anything with the arc tool, I have no control over the sides. I need to do it before I start drawing anything. I'm just going to go ahead and type in 3, and now it says 3 sides. Hit enter. And now when I draw, I'm going to start at this corner right here, this corner right here, and you'll notice that as I pull it out, it's only being made up of 3 sides now, which looks really weird if I go out like this, but at 1 inches, this is going to be just fine. So I really like the 1/4 inch bulge for this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do 0.25. That's 1/4. And there we go. So now what I'm going to do is, just like I did with the other curves that we made, I'm going to use the push-pull tool and push this back. Now in this case, you're going to need to move the camera a little bit as you do. Going to move all the way down here because it's really long. But you notice length doesn't matter. Just keep going until you hit the other side. Click, and you're done. That's it. So now what we're going to do is, just real quick, we're going to smooth out these edges right here. Well, actually, first I'm going to delete these guys here. And now I'm going to swipe over both. Remember, eraser tool, holding down the option key will smooth. Swipe over both these lines right here. And there we go. You notice it does a pretty nice job of shading it just like a curve as well. And now we have a very nice, very comfortable looking couch. Now you could even go take this model one step further. You could make it so that this corner right here curves upwards rather than being a right angle. You could add another right angle down here at the bottom that goes all the way around the edge. You could do all kinds of cool stuff with it, but in this case we're just going to leave it as is. And now we're going to select it. We're going to select all of it by triple clicking. And you notice when you select something, you actually can see those little dotted lines. Those are the lines that are hidden, that you don't see, but that you can still see if you select it. We're going to right click on it, and we're going to group it by saying Make Group. And now it's all just one nice self-contained package. I'm going to grab it by the back corner right here with the Move tool. Remember, M for the Move tool. Grab it right there. And let's move it into our living room in here. And let's have it go up against this wall, kind of right between these two windows right here. And I'm going to actually zoom in on this wall right here, and where that line where the wall and the floor meet, I'm going to snap my back corner right to there so I know it's on the floor and right up against that wall. And how's that look? That looks pretty good. I'm going to move it a little bit towards the right. There we go. Switch to the selection tool and click outside to deselect. Very, very nice. It's a very nice model. And you can see that SketchUp is automatically shading the curves so that they look like they're actually curved and everything. And it's really, the curves in SketchUp are really very nice, even though they aren't actually real. They're just straight lines, but you would never know looking at it right now. So as you can see, curves are a really easy way to add some really nice polish and a professional look to your models, and it makes everything look much more realistic rather than having all these boxes lying around. Now, until next time, you can always visit our website at www.harwoodpodcast.com. There you can check out the show notes, you can download lesson files, all that great stuff. And if you have any questions or comments for me or ideas for future shows, you can send me an email at cameron@harwoodpodcast.com. Until next time, I'll just say goodbye and good modeling.